Welcome. This is Terry Tucker, and he is here on Social Work Your Life to tell his story of adventure and what this life has been for him and how he has wound up in this location at this time. So, Terry, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Well, Kim, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to talking with you today.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this conversation.
Me too.
So, tell me the story.
Yeah, where do you want to start? I'll give you sort of the Reader's Digest version. Born and raised on the south side of Chicago, oldest of three boys. Can't tell this from my voice or looking at me, but I'm 6'8" tall, and actually went to college on a basketball scholarship, despite having 3 knee surgeries in high school. Graduate from college. I'm the first person in my family to graduate from college, and I move home to find a job. And I am, as I said, the first person to graduate. The good news was I was able to find that job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in the marketing department.
Yeah.
Bad news was I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. Professionally, as I said, started out at Wendy's. After that, became a hospital administrator, then made a major pivot in my life and became a police officer. One of the things I did in my law enforcement career was I was a SWAT Team Hostage Negotiator. After that, I became a school security consultant, coached girls' high school basketball, became a motivational speaker. But for the last 11.5 years, I have been battling a rare form of cancer that has seen my foot amputated in 2018, my leg amputated in 2020, and I'm still being treated for tumors that I have in my lungs. And then I guess just finally, my wife and I have been married for 30 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yes, it is.
There was a were a lot of things in there that weren't so cool.
True. But that's life, isn't it? Some good, some bad.
Some good, some bad. So, there were some things in there that I want to pick apart. So, sure. Wendy's to hospital administrator, right? That seems like a giant jump. How did that happen?
It really wasn't that big of a jump. As I mentioned, my father and my grandmother were both dying of different forms of cancer. So they were in the hospital, in and out of the hospital. Both of them died in the hospital where I ended up going to work. When I was at Wendy's, I was a new product marketing supervisor. And the hospital started a new program development process to help people streamline, new procedures, new therapies, and things like that. So it really wasn't that big of a change. It was taking a business model from the private sector and moving it to healthcare administration. So it wasn't as huge of a jump as it appears to be.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. It's the same skills, just in a different location.
Exactly. Yeah. I am working with different people. Instead of working on, hamburgers and hot dogs, you're working on MRIs and speech therapy classes or something like that. So
right. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. And then can we talk a little bit about the SWAT team?
Sure. Yeah, usually your next door neighbor is not a SWAT team hostage negotiator. So
no.
No.
And the thing is, I have a friend who was in the Discover, a friend, acquaintance, met him a couple times, right? Like we're friends on Facebook. Met him. Yeah, he was in the Discover in Washington, D.C., the hostage situation that happened in Washington. I don't know if you know about it. There was a hostage situation in Washington, D.C. in the Discovery building, and he happened to walk in and be through the lobby when it was happening. And he happened to be one of the people who got stuck in the building with 9 other people with the person who was doing what they were doing.
Huh. That's always fun.
Yeah. He was just I was just trying to get to work.
Yeah, wrong place, wrong time, right?
I work for Discovery Channel. Why is this happening right now?
Yeah, that kind of work, you just never know. I mean, you get called out on call-ups for a barricaded subject, and you would have no idea why you were there. And I remember when I first started as a negotiator, they gave us this formula. And the formula, if I can remember, 738-55. And it had to do with how we communicate with each other. 7% of how we communicate are the words that we use. 38% of it is the tone of voice that we use with those words. And then 55% of it is our body language and our facial expressions. Yep. And if you think about us as negotiators, we were not with the person we were negotiating with. I mean, mostly they were barricaded with guns and things like that. So we could be blocks away talking on the phone or behind a locked door. So I never had the benefit of that 55%. I never had the benefit of saying, okay, Kim, X, Y, Z. And I never saw you kind of roll your eyes like, oh, what an idiot. I can't believe he's saying that to me.
Right.
And so we had to figure things out, certainly based on what people were saying, but also what they weren't saying and how they were saying it. And so that got to be kind of an art, a nuance that we had to develop over time as negotiators.
That actually makes me think of texting. Right? Because you can get a line from somebody and you could read that line like 4 different ways. And without the benefit of the eye roll or the way the shoulders slump or the way the shoulders go up or all of it, you have no, and I know we all say texts don't have tone, right? And they don't have tone. You really do have to read into them in some ways to find out if the person obviously you can tell sometimes if they're pissed, but like if they're pissed, they could be like, passively aggressively saying something and you're like, wait, is that meant sarcastically? Is that meant as a joke? Like and so you're right. Like this communication thing, whether you're behind a locked door or you're staring at a screen, like it's so complicated to negotiate and navigate.
It is. But yet if you think about it, we all negotiate every day. And we don't think of it that way. We all sell every day. We sell ourselves. We sell our business. We sell the work that we've just done to other people. And that again, that's kind of a nuance. You a lot of times use negotiation skills in sales, especially. People used to say to us, great job, you talked that person out. And what we used to say to them is, no, we really kind of listened the person out. Not so much, we didn't do as much of the talking. And a lot of, I think what made us good as negotiators was using sort of that curious voice. And we would always ask what and how questions, and we would stay away from why questions. Because if I said, well, Kim, why did you do that? You may be like, oh, wait a minute. Is he accusing me of something? Is there something going on here? As opposed to, hey, Kim, what got us to this point? I can get to the same question. I can get to the same information, but not make you feel like he's accusing me of something.
Right.
And by
without me getting defensive.
Yeah, exactly. And even how and what questions, if you say something, I might say, well, Kim, how am I supposed to do that? Well, I just threw the ball back into your court. Now you're thinking, well, how's he supposed to do that? So without you even realizing it, I've engaged you to help me get you out safely by using that question.
Right.
Go for it. You want to ask me something? Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
How do you use this with your wife?
Well, that's a great question. And I usually, I mean, I'm not going to say we manipulated people, but we use strategies that really did try to get them out. One of the things we used was tactical empathy. And if you think about, let me back up a little bit. Any relationship, whether it's parent, child, husband, wife, boss, subordinate, friends, whatever, the overarching theme of it is trust. Do you trust me? Do I trust you? Because if I trust you, I will open myself up to you. Right. And there were many times we would spend hours over here talking about something that was somebody that was barricaded, when the real issue was over here, but they didn't trust us enough. We hadn't built that up. So tactical empathy was one thing we did. We would, help me understand why we're here. Now, if you were a homicide suspect that just killed 3 people, help me understand. I'm not going to agree with you. I'm not going to agree with what you did, but help
No.
me to understand that, because if I understand it, it makes you feel like I'm trusting you. The other thing we would do was parrot things back. So you would
Yes.
say something and we would use either the last word or the most important word or the last couple words. And I talked about that curious voice. And we would throw that back at you. You know, you're buying a car, you know, the car is $50,000, $50,000. And we would just shut up.
Right.
Because we don't like silence.
No.
So I mean, some of those things, I didn't, the problem with it was, and it was an issue, and it was more of an issue with our daughter than it was anything. I had all these techniques and I knew how to communicate. And then I would go home and she would like dump milk on the floor. And what happens? The emotions come out. You know, now I'm not using any of these techniques that I've spent years learning. I'm just reacting.
Why did you do that?
Yeah, like an idiot. You're an idiot. Well, you know, what are you doing that for? You know all these techniques, but the emotion gets into it. And that was something we...
Oh, no, I meant that you would ask her why, and then that would put her on the defensive, and this is everything you're not supposed to do in negotiation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. It was, yeah. I did not do a very good job of separating what I knew as a negotiator with how I reacted at home as a spouse or as a father. So,
well, that's probably great because it means you're not manipulating your wife, right? Like,
no.
Way to go not to use that in the house.
Yeah. I mean, my wife's much smarter and much stronger than I am, so stronger emotionally. So it's like, yeah, it wasn't gonna work anyway. So.
Just look at you. And I dated a guy for a little while who was a guy who went to law school but didn't take the bar, and so he would like verbally and I would always say, you're lawyering me again, like stop lawyering me, like, right? And so she would just look at you and be like, you're hostage negotiating me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, she knew. I mean, and God love her. I mean, we were not a full-time SWAT team, so we carried, I'm going to really date myself now, we carried pagers. And so, you know, when the pager would go off, almost every Sunday night at dinner, where she had slaved all day to make this nice roast and this great meal for us, and the pager would go off. And, you know, it would start to buzz, and she would look at me and I'm like, sorry, I gotta go. You know, and but she was great about it. She knew that was part of the job. I mean, we talked about it before I started it. So it was like, this is gonna happen. I mean, I remember going out on Christmas Eve once. You know, it's like, it's Christmas Eve. I know, but I gotta go.
There's something weird going on and I gotta go negotiate.
That's right. I gotta go restore order here.
Was she relieved when you stopped doing this job?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, when we got married, I was a suit and tie, you know, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday hospital administrator. And we had moved to Santa Barbara, California.
Were you out of your parents' house when you met her?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, so I get this circular in the mail for Santa Barbara City College. It says, if you take this class, you can apply to be a reserve police officer with any agency within the state. So you can imagine that discussion at dinner that night. It was, honey, what do you think about this? And I'd like to do this. And she was incredibly supportive. She said, take the class, see what happens. So I took it, got hired on it in Santa Barbara. And so I would work all week at my job. And then Friday night, I would come home, I would put on my uniform, I'd go to roll call, and I'd work all night and then come home at 7 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. And she said, I would look at you and you would certainly be exhausted. But she said, you had this big grin on your face. And she said, I knew that's what you were supposed to do. And so when our daughter was born and we moved back to the Midwest to Cincinnati, I was like, look, I want to do this full time. And she was very supportive of me.
Okay. Yeah. I had never heard of a reserve police officer before. That's kind of...
Yeah, you have all the responsibilities and authority of a police officer, but you don't ride by yourself. You ride with a sworn officer. Your training is not as extensive and things like that. You know, it was just another body. I mean, you carried a gun, you could arrest people, you did all that stuff, but you didn't get paid for it. You got like a $50 stipend once a month for uniforms and stuff like that. So yeah, you're doing that job and you're doing it for free. It's like, what an idiot I was. So
Well, no, I mean, if you came home smiling, so this is something we talk about on Social Work Your Life. Like, what is it that makes you come alive? And what is it that you're doing that like makes you feel like you have been ignited on the inside and gives you a sense of purpose and excitement and a joy, right? Like, how do you create more of that? And that's exactly what you're saying. It doesn't, the paycheck isn't the thing that's going to get you there.
No, no,
right?
no, you're right. And that's, you know, you sort of look at my resume and it kind of looks like a Super Bowl went off in a room. You know, it's like just all over the place. But if you understand the backstory to it, my grandfather was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954 and was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury. He was shot in the ankle. And my dad was an infant at the time. And he remembered the stories my grandmother told of that knock on the door of Mrs. Tucker, grab your son, come with us, your husband's been shot. So when I expressed an interest in sort of following in my grandfather's footsteps, my dad was absolutely not. You're going to college, you're going to major in business, going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids and live happily ever after. But that's what my dad wanted. That's not what I felt my purpose was.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, when I graduated, he was dying. So I had a choice. It was probably the first big choice I had as an adult. I was, you know, I could have said, sorry, Dad, I'm going to go blaze my own trail and do my own thing. Or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do. And that's what I did. I went into business because that's what my dad wanted me to do. And I sort of joke, I did what every good son did. I waited till my father passed away and then I followed my own dreams.
Yeah, I totally relate to that, actually.
There you go.
I mean, I've definitely pursued dreams before, but I'm really, really going strong now. So just to bring you in a little bit here, I talk about this a lot. My listeners know and hear the story a lot. Just to bring you in, I am a Hodgkin's lymphoma survivor. And so, you know, chemo and treatment and, you know, doctors, and I don't really talk a little bit about the mental PTS that comes in as a result of going in and facing doctors and all the things. Is this something you're comfortable talking about?
Sure.
Yeah. So what led to the discovery?
So I was a girls' high school basketball coach in Texas, and I had a callus break open on the bottom of my foot, right below my third toe. And initially didn't think much of it because as a coach, you're on your feet a lot. But after it didn't heal for a couple of weeks, I made an appointment and went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor, a friend of mine. And he took an x-ray and he said, Terry, I think you have a little cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he did. And he showed it to me. It was just a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it, no dark spots, no blood, nothing that gave either one of us concern. But fortunately or unfortunately, he sent it off to pathology to have it looked at. And then
but they have to do that legally. If they take anything out of your body, like if they cut off, even if it doesn't matter what it is, even if it's like a skin tag, they like send it off to pathology. Everything gets pathologized.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, it's a great way to bill, you know, so. But I get that call from him 2 weeks later. And as I said, he was a friend. And the more difficulty he was having explaining to me what was going on, the more frightened I was becoming, until finally he just laid it out for me. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years. I have never seen the form of cancer that you have. You have this incredibly rare form of melanoma, which most of us think as too much exposure to the sun and it affects the melanin, the pigment in our skin. This has nothing to do with that. This is a rare form that appears on the bottom of the feet or the palms of the hands. And just for educational purposes, there's an even rarer form that appears in your mucous membranes. So in your nose or your mouth or something like that. And he said, I recommend you go to MD Anderson Cancer Center. And when I did, they were like, yeah, this is pretty much a death sentence. We don't have anything to offer you other than surgery. So if it shows up anywhere where we can't cut it out, there's really nothing we can do for you. So that started the odyssey. Then they put me on a drug called interferon, which was not really a cancer drug. It was, we're going to try to kick the can down the road and buy you more time by being on this drug. Yeah. That was a weekly injection of this drug where the side effects were that I had really severe flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week. after each injection. And I
No.
took those weekly injections for almost 5 years. So imagine having the flu every week
week.
for 5 years. And like I said, wasn't a cure, wasn't going to cure me. It was
Right.
just kicking the can down the road.
And this is a great moment to have this conversation about there are choices you make for quality of life versus goals that you want to achieve. Right? There's a balance between how much physical, and I'm going to use the word torture in a very real way. How much physical torture are you willing to go through in order to achieve a goal that you may or may not be able to achieve?
That's true. That's absolutely true. I'm on a clinical trial drug now. I mean, my disease progressed. As I mentioned, I had my foot amputated in 18, I had my leg amputated in 2020, and I'm still being treated for tumors that I have in my lungs. As a matter of fact, I'll go next week for another round of treatment. And I guess the way I look at it, and I think this helped me from a sports point of view. Like I said, started playing basketball when I was 9 years old, played all the way up till I graduated from college. And I think what team sports, and for me, it was sports. I think it can be whatever team you're a part of. What team sports taught me was the importance of being part of something that's bigger than yourself.
Yes.
You realize on a team that if you don't do your job, not only do you let yourself down, but you let your teammates down, your coaches down, your fans down, et cetera. And if you think about it, the biggest team game we all play is this game of life. And so I'm on this clinical trial drug now that gives me horrible side effects. I shake, I throw up, it's just ugly. And I've been doing this.
I'm going to cut you off. Does Zofran help at all?
Zofran helps, but Zofran backs me up. Yes, so I use a drug called Reglan.
Constantly. Oh, you use Reglan. Yeah. Okay.
So I use Reglan instead of Zofran.
Yeah.
Which was kind of weird because they would give me Zofran as a pre-med. And then when I start to throw up, they would give me Reglan. And I kind of looked at them like, why the Zofran? You know, if you're going to give me Reglan when I start getting sick anyway, why don't we get rid of that? And they're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. So they got rid of it. I think, as you know, you have to advocate for yourself. You have to be your own advocate. It's like, why are we doing that? Yeah. Explain it to me, not medicalese, but explain it to me as a human being. Because if you can do that, then I'm more likely to go along with it. If you can't, then we got a problem. We got a problem.
Exactly. And if you really want my bowels to turn to cement and not be able to poop without a ton of strain, you really need to explain this well to me.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's just it. You know, they give you a drug that has a side effect, and then they give you another drug to counteract the side effect. It's like, why don't we just not do the drug in the first place since you're giving me Reglan and it doesn't back me up?
Right.
Oh, yeah. Okay, fine. That makes sense. So, but why are you thinking of that? Why do I, and I'm sure your experience has been the same way, why am I having to be the sort of doctor, quote unquote, in this situation?
Yeah. So I cut you off. You were saying that you take the medication and it gives you, and you throw up. And then I said, why don't they give you Zofran? So we got on the Zofran.
Yeah.
So now.
Yeah. So they do medicate me and all that, but it's a drug that's probably not going to save my life, because everybody I started on this clinical trial with is now dead. But the way I look at it is. But
you're not.
I'm not.
Okay.
You're absolutely right. But the way I look at it is, it may not save my life, but it may save the life of somebody 5 years from now, 10 years from now, based on the data that the doctors are gleaning from my blood tests and my scans and things like that. I mean, every week I have one of my nurses like, why do you keep doing this to yourself? Why do you keep? And I tell them, because this is something that's bigger than me. And that's why I keep doing this.
Yep. When I was in treatment, they told me that nothing could be inserted in my body, right? No, nothing should go in. So, basically no sex. No, that wasn't really a thing at the time because I wasn't really dating anybody. And I was like, okay, I can just, as I like to say, I can just not pet the kitty. That'll be fine, right? Like I'll just, right? I won't take the kitty for a walk. That's fine. Oh gosh, what was I? At the end, I got myself into a clinical trial about how chemotherapy affects the fertility rate. So before I started my treatment, they did a whole bunch of studies where I was put in some uncomfortable positions with a ultrasound wand. so that they could take a look at my ovaries and count a whole bunch of things and do all the things. And they also had to like take some blood. And then every time I went after my chemo, long story, my body rejected the port. So I had to get it through my veins, and my veins turned to shit. And now you can't like get a vein on me to save your life. Somebody did the other day and I almost like fell out of the chair. I was like, holy crap, you found a vein. um, so they would stick me. I would go and get these studies done about how, and my numbers were obviously very different from pre to post. Like if one ovary had 40 something, it dropped down to like 9, right? Like it was clear that chemo definitely shut down all of the fertility that was going on, which I didn't mind. I didn't want kids, so this wasn't a big deal for me. But they would go and they would have to stab me with the needle to get blood, sometimes 5, 6, 7 times, because of how hard it was to find a vein because of what chemo had done to my veins. Especially because right after the chemo, like they were hard and crunchy, like you could feel them all the way up, the way that the chemo had affected it, because my body rejected the port. And people would be like, why are you still going if they have to stab you and you've got all these spots where it didn't work and you're completely bruised? Like, why are you doing this? And I'm like, because what I went through is going to help somebody else and help them do the research and help them know that if somebody really wants to get pregnant after this, they're going to know what they're looking at.
Yeah, I had to sign, I'm sure you did as well, the form for the clinical trial. And I thought it was hilarious. The study coordinator is like, this part here, you and your wife aren't thinking about having any kids anymore. I looked at her like, we're in our 60s. If we're having kids, there's a star rising in the east and wise men coming from on far. So it was like, absolutely not. You can even gloss over that paragraph. It ain't happening anymore.
Yeah.
So
yeah, my oncologist sent me to the fertility. Okay, so this is, I'm going to bring you into who Kim Beam was before. So my oncologist sent me in to the fertility specialist before I started treatment, because she's like, this is going to tank out your ovaries, and you're going to want to harvest before we treat,
right.
if that's what we're doing. So I go in and I'm like, I don't want kids. I'm a Christian at the time. I don't know where you stand in your faith, so please don't be. But I was a fundamentalist, and I had some very strong views and very strong opinions about what people should and shouldn't be doing with their bodies, right? I like to say I had a stick up my ass. And
I heard that in one of your podcasts. So.
And so I get in there, and this is where my bluntness and my judgment came out when I was younger. And I was like 33. I get in there and she sits down and she goes, okay, do you want to harvest? Do you not want to harvest? And I know things are different now, but like she basically said, if you're going to harvest, we have to and we're going to freeze. It's better to harvest and freeze seminated than not seminated, because if they're seminated, they have more viability. Whereas if we defrost them and then try to seminate them, it doesn't go as well. And I was like, well, I'm not really dating anybody. She's like, are you with somebody that you would like to do this with? And I was like, no. And she was like, well, we can give you the catalog, which my sister later called the data log. We can give you the data log of people who are potentials that have, donated so that women can have children. And I looked at her stone-faced, completely serious, and I went, how did you get into this profession? Me this heart-wrenching, well, I've run into a lot of women who really wanted to get pregnant and really wanted to have kids, and the timing never worked, or the person never worked, or the person they're with, they can't, and so they needed some assistance to have the child they always dreamed of. And then I was like, okay, yeah, there it is.
Yeah, what you dream of and what they end up being are sometimes two different things. Yes.
Another reason I don't want children.
I am very, I can't agree with you on that. I'm very, I love our daughter. She's a tremendous young woman now. So, I mean, there was a time after my dad died that I didn't think I wanted kids either. It's like, I don't want to have to put my kids through what I went through with my dad. But at the same time, I have a very strong faith. I've been Catholic my entire life. It works for me. I don't put it on anybody else. Pardon
did
me?
not mean, I'm sorry if I offended. I did not
You
mean.
did not offend me at all. No, 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 no. You did not offend me at all. But I mean, I know what works for me, and I know it doesn't work for a lot of other people, and I never try to push it on anybody. It's like, this is what works for me. But it was, I think, in a lot of ways, God kind of works in mysterious ways. And
Oh, oh, it really does.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna, this is not your story, right? And I'm gonna say this, and I know this is not your story, but I hated everything about being diagnosed. I hated everything about having cancer. I hated everything about the words that came at me from the doctor. Like when he sat down and he was like, okay, it's either this, in which case we just crack open your chest, we take it out and we put your chest back together and you go on living the rest of your life and there's nothing we have to do. If it's not this, then we're going to have to do treatment because it's going to be something way more significant. And I basically was like, well, that's not going to happen. God's not going to let that happen. That's not going to happen. Like, I'm a child of God. That's not going to happen. And I have to say, I hated every single second of treatment and going through treatment and even coming out of treatment and 2 years after. But there was like a forest fire, and how the forest fire is necessary to release some seeds in order to get new growth and get new vegetation, that the forest fire actually is beneficial to the environment in some ways. I would say Kim Beam, as she stands here, would not be here if it hadn't been for the journey that I took through the Hodgkins. How do you see yourself transforming?
Yeah, I mean, when I was first diagnosed, I think I went through all the stages that we would associate with grief. You know, first it was denial. I can't possibly have cancer.
Nope.
You know, I've done everything. I mean, I did. I mean, I was an athlete. I ate right. And when my dad died, I'm like, I'm having a physical every year, whatever my doctor recommends test-wise, I'm going to do that. I had done everything. Yet I got this cancer. So first it's denial. And then you get mad. How can I possibly have this cancer? I've done everything right in my life. And then there was a sort of bargaining with God that our daughter was in high school at the time. It's like, look, just let me live long enough to see her graduate from high school. And then I absolutely got down, why me? And then you kind of come to the realization, why not me? Why am I any different? Why am I special? Why shouldn't I have to go through this trial? And then you get to a point, at least I did, where it was like, okay, this sucks, but I'm going to have to embrace the suck. I don't like the cards that I've been dealt, but I'm going to play these cards to the best of my ability. Now, if you would have told me in 2012 that I'd still be here in 2023, I'd have been like, well, according to them, I won't be. But I never focused on the dying part of it. I figured I don't have any control over that. I remember when it was about 8 months after I had my leg amputated and I had these tumors in my lungs, my doctor showed me my CAT scan. And I have no medical background. I don't know how to read a CAT scan, but you can kind of look at it and be like, well, that sure doesn't look like it's supposed to be there, And so I had these big tumors in both my lungs. I had fluid all around the pleural spaces. And I remember looking at them and saying, okay, I don't know anything about how to read this, but how was I alive? I remember he kind of put his head down and sort of shook his head no. And he said, I don't know, because you shouldn't have been. Which said to me that God's not done with me yet. When I die, where I die, how I die, way above my pay grade. Don't spend a lot of time worrying about the dying part of it. Spend more time concentrating on living the life that I'm supposed to live at this point.
After I got done with treatment, I wound up back in my classroom and I went through a very morbid period, right? I was definitely in I was reading with non-readers, people like students who really couldn't read. We were reading high interest material. It didn't even matter what it was. So I pulled in like the Last Suppers of all of these serial killers, or killers like Dahmer and, other people who were known for being, bad people, Gainey, people who are known for being bad people. Yeah. Timothy McVeigh, and then what they had for their Last Supper. Because I thought that was fascinating about what they chose to eat as their last night on Earth. And so students would come in and they would say things and I forget what they would say, but some of my response was about how every day we're getting one day closer to death. Like every day we're one day closer. And it would be like a benign kind of question. I forget what it was. And I'd be like, every day we're one day closer. And they were like, oh, I'm dying to do this, like dying to that. I'm like, yeah, every day you're one day closer. Right.
Well, you're right. I mean, there's that saying memento mori, which is, remember death, or remember that you're going to die. I can't remember, one of the Rolling Stones had a ring that had that on it, memento mori, to help people. And I think it's important. I think about dying every day, not in a morbid, like, oh my God, I'm going to die. Yeah, we're all going to die. I got news for you. Absolutely, all of us are going to die. Nobody gets out of this alive. And it was funny when
it's like the death and taxes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, we all pay them, and we all end up on the other side of the dirt. And I remember when I found out I had these tumors in my lungs, and I was going to have my leg amputated. I went to the cemetery. I went to the mortuary. I went to the church, and I planned my funeral. And because I go on these podcasts and I speak in person about motivation and the need to keep moving forward, I actually got some brushback from people who were like, well, don't you think that's kind of defeatist? I kind of had a look at them like, well, the last time I checked, we're all going to die. Nobody gets out of this world alive. All of us are going to die, but not all of us are really going to live. And I'll give you a Native American Blackfoot proverb that I heard years ago that I absolutely love. And it goes like this: when you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. That's what I want. That's what I'm looking for.
So now you're in a wheelchair. Is that correct?
I am.
And so you've experienced full body living.
I have.
Right? Basketball player, walking through your kitchen, taking a shower by standing up, right? You've done all of that as a full body person. And then you had to transition to being a not full body person. What has that been like?
That's an interesting question. I had a nurse recently ask me a very similar question. So, what was it like to have your foot amputated and to have your leg amputated? And what I told her was, it certainly hasn't been easy. Being 6'8", learning to walk again, falling is not an option. You fall from this height, you get hurt. So falling's not an option. But what I told her was, cancer can take all my physical faculties, but cancer can't touch my mind, it can't touch my heart, and it can't touch my soul. And that's who I am. That's who you are, Kim. That's who everybody who's listening to us is. And we spend a great deal of time on this body. We go to the gym, we got to get enough rest, we got to eat right, we've got to reduce stress. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. You absolutely should do that. But what I am suggesting is, maybe every day, spend a little bit more time on who you really are: your heart, your mind, your soul. This body, we all know, we've just been talking about it. It's going to die, it's going to decay, it's going to go away. But your heart, your mind, and your soul, those things are eternal and they will last forever. And I don't think we spend nearly as much time working on those things as we do working on this house or this vessel that holds who we are.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm going through some transitions with food in the past year or two, and it's made me think about my body in a completely different way. I feel like we're now much more together. Like we're in this more together, this lifetime more together than it's my body and then my soul and my brain. Right there, I used to think of my soul and my brain being housed in this space that's kind of annoying.
Mm-hmm.
And it has all these annoying things that happen with it. And I no longer feel that way about my body. It's no longer this annoying space that I'm housed in. We're in this lifetime together. We
are. And I mean, it's different for me now, and I use humor a lot with being in a wheelchair and things. I really do. When I had my leg or my foot amputated initially, I remember I was walking, that's sort of a loose term, but I was walking out of the hospital in this boot that absolutely accentuated the fact I did not have a foot. And there was a woman at the entrance or the exit, and she was staring incredibly hard. And I was kind of looking around like, is she staring at me? I was the only person there. So I'm like, well, I guess she is. So as soon as I got up to her, I turned, I looked her right in the eye, and I said, don't worry, it'll grow back. And I kept walking. And I turned and looked over my shoulder, and she had this look on her face like, will it? Is this guy like a salamander or something that, you cut off its tail and he grows another one? Is this really? I thought, and I laughed the entire way out. I'm like, if you're going to just blatantly stare at me,
Yeah.
I am absolutely going to throw a joke at you or something like that to kind of make you think that. And, I kind of, I'm sort of a butt man now because I'm kind of eye to eye with everybody's rear end, so, I mean, it's just.
I would think it would be more the small of their back, considering the fact that you're so tall.
I can kind of slouch down in the chair, so it's just, I mean, you can be miserable or you can just use it and make fun of it and have fun with it. And that's, that's kind of what I do, wheelchair races down the hall with other people and stuff. So yeah, I mean, use it.
You can get places a lot faster in a wheelchair than you can walking.
I can. I mean, but my other leg is functional, so I can use my leg and my arms to move the chair and things like that. So, and I can stand up and I can still do all that stuff. It's just balance. And that was one of the most difficult things since I had my leg amputated during COVID. My doctor had to get special permission to actually do the surgery. He did it at a hospital that was within the University of Colorado systems, but did not accept COVID patients. The morning of the surgery, my wife literally dropped me off at the hospital. I was not allowed to have
I think you say she got COVID. Okay, go ahead.
No. I was not allowed to have anybody with me. Right. I was taken back to a pre-op area where, there's like 40 different bays. I was the only person there. And I was supposed to be in the hospital for 10 days to 2 weeks to learn how to function, without having a leg. They sent me home after 48 hours. They're like, it's too much of a danger. Go home and figure it out. I'm like, really? Figure out how to get around, figure out how to move rugs that shouldn't be there so you don't trip or slip and that kind of stuff. So
acute rehab wasn't an option?
Nope. It was just go home.
Really?
No. Yeah, it was.
I think our acute rehab was open. We had, so I work for a hospital system. And we have an acute rehab within our hospital system. And I think during COVID, I was working there during COVID. So I know what you're talking about not having family and how hard that is, because I watched that happen to all of the people I worked with. They would show up at the hospital and their family members weren't allowed in. And then we would get calls as the social worker in the hospital. I would get calls from irate family members because they hadn't heard from the doctor. They didn't know what was going on. They didn't know what the tests were showing. They couldn't see anything.
Right. Yeah, it was bad all the way around. And you were right there. You were on the front lines of it. And, I was on it from a patient perspective. And, I look back and, the fact that I was an athlete, the fact that I had stayed in shape and all that kind of stuff certainly benefited me when that happened. It's like, okay, I can still get around. I can use a walker. I have the upper body strength. I do all, so it wasn't as bad, I think, as somebody that would have been much more chronic with other conditions and things like that.
Yeah, I can totally see that. Yeah. What did you do with the anger?
I never got angry. I mean, people used to, and I didn't. I didn't. It was like, okay, I'm going to have to deal with this. I just didn't see any point. I mean, I was tired. I was certainly depleted physically and mentally, emotionally. It was like, I don't have time to be angry. It's like, how am I going to effectively live in this? And I think I am so lucky to have a wife, a daughter, and people that help me. But I never, people would ask me, well, who do you blame? You got cancer. Who do you blame? Like, what do you mean? Who do I blame? Well, we're great. Very few people take personal responsibility for their own success and happiness. If you don't become successful, you blame somebody. I'll blame my parents. I'll blame my boss. I'll blame my station in life. And people would ask me, who do you blame? Like, I don't blame anybody. And then when they found out I had a faith life, they were like, well, you must blame God. And I used to joke with them. It's like, I don't think God got up on a Tuesday morning, checked his to-do list and said, Terry Tucker cancer today. I don't think that happened at all. So I never got angry. I got mad at the fact that how could I get this after I did everything right? But I never tried to project that onto, and I'll be honest with you, this was a conscious decision because I've seen a lot of people do this, and I'm sure as a social worker you have as well, where people take out their frustrations on other people. I'll give you an example. Every Monday before I'm treated, I have to give blood, and my veins are just as horrible as yours are. And so at 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm there with the receptionist opening the lab. And she said to me a couple of weeks ago, she was like, you're always so nice to me. How was your weekend? What did you do? And things like that. And I said, well, okay. I said, do you find that to be foreign? And she said, oh, absolutely. She said, you have no idea how many people treat me bad and yell at me and get upset with me. And I said to her, and she's a young girl, I said, do you know why that is? She was like, well, no, not really. I said, put yourself in their shoes. Put yourself in the fact that they're going to get a blood test that's probably going to tell them that they've got cancer, or their doctor's going to want to do surgery or take their leg off or start them on drugs that's going to cause them to lose their hair and feel terrible. They're afraid. And I said, that puts you in a unique position to be nothing but kind and good to these people. It's not you. They're not lashing out at you because of you. They're lashing out because of their circumstances.
Yep.
And it gives you an opportunity to be kind to those people. And you could just see the light bulb went on with her, like, oh, it's not me.
It's her.
Yeah, it's their circumstances, which puts you, like I said, in a unique position to make their life a little bit better by how you treat them. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of what I've tried to do. I've never taken my disease. I made a decision very early, never going to take it out on a doctor or a nurse or a therapist or anybody, a phlebotomist, anybody who's trying to help me. It's not their fault I got cancer, so why should I take it out on them?
Right. When I was sick, I actually would have, I body rejected the port, had to be in the hospital for a number of days because, blood clots, it's concerning.
Yep.
And one of the nurses one of the times I was admitted, I was down at the end of the hall. So like the nurse had everybody else at the front of the hall. And I was like the one patient down at the end of the hall. And so she would come down and find me. And this is when I had realized that like chemo was taking my brain and I didn't know what had happened in a book. And I had like gotten really far and I didn't know who any of the characters were. I didn't know anything that was happening. And I was like, well, I must have gotten here organically, but I don't remember shit. So I'm going to start reading books that I adore. So if I don't remember shit, I won't know it because I already know the story.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was down at the end of the ward, end of the line, in a room reading Jane Eyre because it's one of my favorites. And if I didn't know what happened and I forgot it, it wouldn't matter because I already have all the knowledge of what happens in that book. And so I was sitting on the bed and like the nurse would come in and she would just stand and talk to me for a while and ask if I was okay. I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. Like, need anything? No, I've got my water. I've got my crackers. Like I've got my bucket friend in case I have to be sick. I've got everything I need. And and then I would be like, is there anything you need? Are you okay? And she's like, actually, can I just like stay in here another couple of minutes? I was like, you can do whatever you want. She's like, it's really taxing at the other end of the hall. And she's like, coming down here is like a breath of fresh air. Cause I'm like, yeah, I've got blood clots. They're worried I'm going to like stroke out. I'm just going to hang out down here. And like, it wasn't until after the blood clots had cleared, I was like, you really could have died there, or you could have had something really bad happen and you didn't. And my brain just never went there. It just like, it wasn't until it was over that my brain was like, do you know what happened?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. There were many. I mean, I've had a blood clot in my lung. I still have a blood clot in my stump that I get scanned every 6 weeks. And I remember getting the call. It's like, you got to come to the hospital immediately. I'm like, why? It's like, well, because you got this blood clot in your stump. And I'm like, okay, I'll come in. And but I said to my wife, I'm like, all right, I'm going to eat first. I'm going to take a shower. I'm going to do it. Yeah, I mean, I'm doing all this stuff. It's like, then I'll go. And they were, I got, and finally they just came to the realization, we just think it's a result of your amputation. We're not worried about it. It's not going anywhere. We'll just leave it. Okay, fine. I like it. It didn't bother me. I didn't even know it was there. It didn't hurt. It wasn't red. Nothing that would give me any indication. But that's just it. We are, and you probably feel this way, knowing that you've sort of cheated death from time to time. That we are here for such a small period of time. I mean, if you think about it.
So quick.
Yeah, I mean, we blink and we're gone. And people spend so much time on things that do not matter, that are not important, that don't give them pleasure, family, friends, love, things like that. Those are important things. Those are things that are going to last. How much money you made, what kind of car you drove, what kind of house you lived in, all that kind of, they're great if you can do it, but why spend your entire life and then die? Because I guarantee you, you're going to be in the same plot of dirt that the pauper who's buried next to you is in.
Oh,
So
I'm not even going to be in a plot of dirt. I'm just going to get my body cremated and be thrown.
you're going to burn. Yeah.
Right? I'm just going to go someplace, right? Just throw me to the wind.
Yeah. I've got I'm in a tomb. I'm in the wall. I'm going to play Pink Floyd's, another brick in the wall when they bury me. So but you laugh, have fun, make jokes, enjoy your life. Life is too short to be serious all the time.
It really is. Well, yeah, that's just it. Like, life is too short. Well, before I even got sick, my family used to do this this thing where we would go to a book discussion group for the summer. Like, it was a 1-week book discussion group up at Colby College in Maine. You would read all this really intense literature and you would sit around at tables and talk about it, but you had to read the literature to get there. And it's not just like, it's like Kant, right? And it's like people who have like one word, one sentence is like the whole page. The whole page is just one sentence. And you're like, really, honestly, you could be more succinct than this. And so there came a time even before I got sick that I said, life is too short to read crap.
Yeah.
Right. But there's a level of crap that you need to read in order to like get through what you need to get through. Right. Like, I understand that, just like there's a level of crap that we all have to go through to get to where we want to be. And that includes therapy. And that includes, like, for you and me, that includes treatment. Right. For somebody else, that might mean like hitting bottom before you're willing to stand up and say, okay, I'm ready to be better. Right. I don't know what the level of crap is going to look like from one person to another person. But life really, the quicker I'm one of those people that I'm like, can you please just turn the flame on hot? Turn the flame on hot so I learn it faster, so I can get through this moment, so I can live, because I want to be living. I don't want to be stuck. I don't want to be stuck.
Yeah. And I felt exactly that way when I mentioned I was on interferon, that gave me flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days for 5 years. And I really felt there was a difference between living and not dying. And I was in that not dying phase. I really wasn't living. I wasn't contributing. I was sick all the time. I prayed to die. I'm like, look, God, come on. I'm not contributing. There's nothing good that's going to come out of this. I never thought about suicide, but at the same time, I'm like, look, hey, you're the big guy. Come on, you can take me out of this if you want.
You brought me in, you can bring me out.
Yeah, exactly. And so I know what you feel. There's a difference in life. And I think when you are you've been in the living part, you are in the living part now. And then you've also been in I'm just not dying. I'm really not doing anything. This sucks. I feel terrible. What's the point? And I think the point is you have to embrace adversity. I think one thing cancer's taught me is I don't think you really know who you are until you've been tested by some form of adversity in your life. And I think the best way, people always ask me, well, how do you overcome adversity? How do you deal with that? And I always tell them, it's not really hard, but it's something that you won't want to do. And that's find one thing every day that scares you, that makes you nervous, that makes you uncomfortable, that's potentially embarrassing, and do that one thing every day. Because if you do that, when the big disasters in life hit us, you lose somebody who's close to us, you get let go from your job, as you and I know, you find out you have a chronic or a terminal illness, you will be so much more resilient to handle those things than the people who've never gotten outside their comfort zones, who've never done anything difficult in their life. But people don't want to do that. Yeah. And it's like, well, how do you do it? Well, do you want to clean the house today? No, not really. Go clean the house. Do you want to go to the gym today? No, not really. Go to the gym. Do you want to study for that test? No, not really. Study for that test. Do the things that you don't want to do to callous your mind so that when you experience the things you and I have experienced, you'll be much more resilient to handle those things.
That is brilliant. I think that's a really strong message to leave on. I thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me on. I enjoyed talking with you.
Yeah, you're great. What how do we find you? If I wanted to hear more from you, I wanted to know more, I wanted to read more of your story, follow along with your health journey, is that available to us in the world?
I'm not a big, I've got a friend of mine who has the exact same kind of cancer I did. And every time he goes for treatment, it's like, there's a picture of me with the nurse. There's a picture. I'm not that kind of guy. I mean, when I'm in treatment, you kind of,
Oh yeah.
sort of fall off the grid, but
Yep.
so I have a blog. It's called Motivational Check. Every day I put up a thought for the day. I put up the Monday morning motivational message. You can get access to my book there. You can leave me a message. I have recommendations for other books to read, videos to watch, my social media links. That's all at motivationalcheck.com.
CHECK.
Yes.
Okay.
Motivationalcheck.com. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kim.
Okay.
I wish you all the best, and I hope your health stays as good as it possibly can.
Oh, thank you. I'm working really hard on that.
Good.
So I'm just going to end the recording.